The market square of Calemont had gone silent. Jessamine Thorne pressed her back against the damp stone of the tanner's shop, her breath coming in shallow gasps that fogged in the evening air. Blood dripped from a gash above her left eye, trailing down her temple like a crimson tear she couldn't wipe away. Her hands were shaking too badly to try. 3 days. 3 days since her world had collapsed. 3 days of running through forests and fields, sleeping in ditches, drinking from streams. Her gown, once pale blue silk embroidered with silver thread, hung from her frame in muddy tatters. Her slippers had disintegrated somewhere in the marshlands east of the city. Now she stood barefoot on cobblestones slick with rain, hunted like an animal through the capital of an empire that had once been her home. She could hear them, boots on stone, the clink of armor. Soldiers bearing the crimson serpent of House Ventrell, fanning through the market, checking every doorway, every shadow. Looking for her. Traitor, they called her now. Spy. Enemy of the crown. The lies had come so easily from Lord Corvin's lips. Jessamine closed her eyes, and the memory surfaced unbidden. That night in his study, 4 days ago, when she'd found the letters hidden beneath the false bottom of his desk drawer. Letters bearing the seal of Kestria, Valdoria's oldest enemy. Letters detailing troop movements, supply routes, the rotation of the Emperor's personal guard. Lord Corvin Ventrell, her guardian since her parents' death, the man who'd raised her like a daughter for 12 years, was selling his empire to its enemies. When she'd confronted him, his expression hadn't changed. That was what haunted her most. No shock. No shame. Just that same pleasant smile he wore when discussing the weather or choosing wines for dinner. "My dear Jessamine," he'd said, pouring himself brandy as though they were discussing her embroidery. "You should have pretended you saw nothing. I can't. This is treason. Thousands will die. Yes, they will." He'd sipped his drink. "The question is whether you'll be among them." She'd tried to run that night. Tried to reach the palace. To warn someone, anyone. But Corvin had anticipated her. By morning, the city was plastered with notices bearing her name and face. Jessamine Thorne, wanted for conspiracy against the Empire. Armed and dangerous. Reward, 500 gold crowns. He'd taken every piece of evidence, burned his letters, replaced them with forgeries in her handwriting, hidden in her chambers for the guards to find. Her testimony against his, and he was one of the most powerful lords in Valdoria. She was nothing. An orphan he'd sheltered out of obligation. No family, no allies, no proof. Just a death sentence waiting to be carried out. "She went this way," a voice echoed from the next street. "Check the tanners." Jessamine's heart seized. She pushed off from the wall, forcing her bleeding feet to move, stumbling deeper into the maze of alleys behind the market. The stones cut into her soles. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Just a little further. Just. She rounded a corner and froze. 3 soldiers stood in the alley ahead, their backs to her. They hadn't seen her yet. They were focused on something else. Someone crumpled against the wall at their feet. A man. Ragged clothes hanging from a thin frame, matted dark hair obscuring his face. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading across the cobblestones from a wound in his side. A beggar, from the look of him. One of the countless unfortunates who haunted Calemont's back alleys, invisible to anyone who mattered. "Just finish it," one soldier said, drawing his sword. "Captain wants the streets clear before the Emperor's procession tomorrow. No vagrants, no beggars, no problems. Please." The beggar's voice was rough, weak. "I've done nothing. You exist. That's enough." The soldier raised his blade. Jessamine should have stayed hidden. She should have let them finish their cruel work and slipped away while they were distracted. Self-preservation demanded it. Logic demanded it. But something in the beggar's voice, the quiet dignity beneath the desperation, stopped her. She thought of Corvin, of how easily powerful men discarded the powerless, of how no one had stood for her when the accusations came. The sword began its descent. Jessamine stepped into the alley. "Stop!" The soldiers spun, 3 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The torn dress, the blood on her face, the desperate wildness in her expression. She looked at the beggar. He looked at her. And in that single moment, before she even understood why, Jessamine made a choice that would change everything. "That man," she heard herself say, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest, "is my husband." The silence that followed was absolute. The lead soldier, a thick-necked man with a scar running from his ear to his jaw, lowered his sword slowly. His eyes moved from Jessamine to the bleeding man on the ground, then back again. "Your husband," he repeated flatly. "Yes." Jessamine forced herself to walk forward, each step an act of will. Her legs felt like water. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain they could hear it. "We were separated in the crowd. I've been searching for him for hours." She knelt beside the beggar, taking his hand in hers. His fingers were ice cold, slick with blood. But when she looked into his face, truly looked, something caught in her chest. His eyes. They were gray. Not the dull gray of stone or ash, but the luminous gray of storm clouds lit from within. And despite the blood, despite the pain etched across his features, those eyes were sharp, calculating, aware. These were not the eyes of a broken man. "Darling," she said softly, willing him to play along. "I've found you." For a heartbeat, he simply stared at her. Then slowly, understanding flickered across his face. "My love." His voice was stronger than it had been moments before. "I knew you'd come." The scarred soldier snorted. "You expect us to believe this filth is married to—" He paused, looking at her ruined dress. "To whatever you are? I expect nothing from men who would murder an unarmed man in an alley." Jessamine met his gaze without flinching. "But I'm telling you the truth. He's mine, and I'm taking him home. He's a vagrant. The captain's orders? We're to clear vagrants from the streets." She stood, positioning herself between the soldiers and the wounded man. "He's not a vagrant. He's my husband. He has a home. A name." "What name?" Jessamine's mind raced. She looked down at the man, at those impossible gray eyes, and said the first thing that came to her. "Theron. His name is Theron." Something shifted in the beggar's expression, something she couldn't read. "Theron what?" the soldier demanded. "Theron Ashford." She lifted her chin. "Of Thornhaven. My family's estate in the eastern provinces." The lie came easier than it should have, perhaps because she had nothing left to lose. The soldiers exchanged glances. The scarred one stepped closer, studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. "You look familiar," he said slowly. "Have we met?" Jessamine's blood turned to ice. The notices. Her face was on notices throughout the city. "I have one of those faces." She kept her voice light, dismissive. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my husband needs a physician." She bent to help Theron rise, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, bearing his weight as best she could. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath the ragged clothes, and she staggered slightly before finding her balance. "Please," she said over her shoulder, letting vulnerability creep into her voice. "He's all I have." The scarred soldier watched them for a long moment. Then he sheathed his sword with a grunt of disgust. "Get out of here, both of you, and keep your husband off the streets, or next time I won't ask questions." Jessamine didn't wait to be told twice. She half-carried, half-dragged Theron down the alley, around the corner, through a gap in a crumbling wall, until the soldiers' voices faded behind them. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. "Thank you." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. She looked at him, this stranger she'd just claimed as her own, and felt the first stirring of unease. "Who are you?" she whispered. His eyes held hers, and the ghost of a smile crossed his bloodied face. "Someone who owes you a debt, Jessamine Thorne." She went cold. He knew her name. "How do you know who I am?" They'd found shelter in an abandoned stable at the edge of the merchant district. Hay that smelled of mold and age. Moonlight filtering through gaps in the rotting roof. Not safe. Nowhere was safe, but hidden enough for now. Jessamine pressed a torn strip of her underskirt against the wound in Theron's side, trying to stop the bleeding. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind was racing. He knew her name. This beggar. This stranger. This man she'd risked everything to save. He'd spoken her name like he'd known it all along. "I asked you a question." Her voice came out harder than she intended. Theron winced as she applied pressure. In the dim light, she could see the wound more clearly now. A blade had sliced deep across his ribs, but it had missed anything vital. Painful, not fatal. He'd live. Whether she would was another matter. "Your face is on notices throughout the city," he said carefully. "Jessamine Thorne, wanted for treason. 500 gold crowns. And yet you let me save you. You played along." She sat back on her heels, studying him. "Why? You could have turned me in. Collected the reward. From the men about to kill me?" That ghost of a smile again. "That would have required surviving the next 30 seconds. You're deflecting. I'm evading. There's a difference." Jessamine's eyes narrowed. She looked at him. Really looked. In a way she hadn't had time for in the alley. The ragged clothes were convincing, but now that she was close, she noticed details that didn't fit. His hands, though dirty, bore no calluses of labor. His speech, though careful, carried the precise diction of education. And beneath the grime, his features were too refined, too symmetrical. This was no beggar. "Your clothes don't match your hands," she said quietly. "Your voice doesn't match your station, and that wound—" She gestured to his side. "That's a sword cut. Clean. Professional. Someone tried to kill you deliberately, not randomly." Theron was silent for a long moment. "You're observant." "I'm desperate. There's a difference." He laughed. Actually laughed. Then grimaced as the movement pulled at his wound. "Fair enough." He met her eyes. "You want to know who I am? I'm someone who came to Kaelmont looking for a traitor. Someone selling imperial secrets to Kestria. I got close to the truth, and—" He gestured to his bloodied side. "The truth objected." Jessamine's heart stuttered. "The traitor," she breathed. "You're hunting the traitor." "I was, before his men found me first." "Lord Corvin?" The name tasted like poison on her tongue. "Lord Corvin Vantrell. He's the one you're looking for." Theron went very still, those storm cloud eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "How do you know that name?" "Because he's my guardian. Because I found his letters to Kestria. Because when I tried to expose him, he accused me instead." Her voice cracked. "Because I'm not a traitor. I'm the only one who knows the truth, and no one will ever believe me." Silence hung between them. Heavy. Electric. Then Theron reached into his ragged tunic and withdrew something small. Something that caught the moonlight and gleamed gold. A ring. Heavy. Ancient. Engraved with a symbol Jessamine had seen only once before, on the imperial banners that flew above the palace, the Emperor's personal seal. "What if someone did believe you?" Theron said softly. Jessamine stared at the ring, then at the man holding it, and the ground beneath her certainty began to crack. "Who are you?" His answer was barely a whisper. "Someone who can give you everything you need to destroy Lord Corvin." He paused. "If you're willing to trust me." Jessamine's mind reeled. The ring in Theron's palm bore the Emperor's personal seal, the twin phoenixes of House Valdric, rising from flames that had been ancient when Valdoria was still a collection of warring provinces. Only 3 people in the entire empire were permitted to carry that symbol. The Emperor himself, the Emperor's heir, and the Emperor's shadow, the veiled hand, the nameless enforcer who answered to no one but the throne itself. "You're not a beggar," Jessamine said slowly. "You never were." "No." Theron closed his fingers around the ring. "I'm not." "Then what are you? Imperial intelligence? A spy?" "Something like that." He shifted, grimacing as the movement pulled at his wound. "I was sent to investigate the leak in our military intelligence. The trail led to Lord Corvin's inner circle. I got close, too close, and his men caught me 3 nights ago. 3 nights. The same night she'd fled. He must have realized we were both threats at the same time. It seems Lord Corvin decided to clean house." Theron's jaw tightened. "He had me beaten, stabbed, and dumped in the streets to die like a common vagrant. No one would investigate. No one would care." His eyes met hers. "Except you did." Jessamine looked away. "I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking more clearly than anyone I've met in years." He tucked the ring back into his tunic. "You saw a stranger about to be murdered, and you stepped between him and the blade. That's not confusion, Jessamine. That's courage." The sound of her name in his voice did something strange to her chest. "Courage doesn't matter if we're both dead by morning." She stood pacing the narrow stable. "Corvin's men are searching everywhere. The city gates are watched. Every guard in Caelmont knows my face. And you—" She gestured at his blood-soaked clothes. "You can barely stand. Which is why I need you." She turned. "What?" Theron pushed himself upright against the wall, his face pale but determined. "I have authority, resources, the power to clear your name and bring Corvin to justice. But right now, I'm wounded, compromised, and officially dead as far as anyone knows." He met her gaze steadily. "You have no power, no resources, but you have something I need desperately. Knowledge of Corvin's household, his habits, his secrets. You lived in that house for 12 years. You want me to help you destroy him. I want us to destroy him together." The word together hung in the air between them. "And in return?" Jessamine asked carefully. "In return, I give you everything. Protection. Vindication. Your name restored. The entire Empire will know the truth about what Corvin did to you." He paused. "But I need you to trust me. Stay with me. Help me build an unassailable case." "Stay with you," she repeated. "As what? Your informant? Your prisoner?" "As my wife." Jessamine's breath caught. "The pretense you created in that alley," Theron continued. "It's actually perfect. A wounded man traveling with his wife attracts far less attention than 2 fugitives moving separately. We maintain the fiction until we're somewhere safe. Then we plan our attack. You're asking me to bind myself to a man I don't know, a man who won't even tell me his real position. I'm asking you to survive." His voice softened. "I know it's not fair. I know I'm asking you to trust someone who's given you no reason to, but Jessamine—" He reached out, his bloodied fingers brushing hers. "I swear on my life, I will not betray you. Help me bring down Corvin, and I will spend every resource I have making sure you never fear again." She looked at his hand, at the blood drying on his skin, at the determination burning in those eyes the color of winter storms. He was asking her to leap into darkness with nothing but his word as a net, but the alternative was dying alone in an alley, forgotten and condemned. "If you betray me," she said quietly, "I'll find a way to destroy you, even if it takes my last breath." "I would expect nothing less." She took his hand. "Then we have a deal, husband." His gaze changed, a flicker of respect, perhaps, or something deeper she couldn't name. "Then let's go, wife." He squeezed her fingers. "We have an empire to save." They moved through the city like ghosts. Theron knew Caelmont's underbelly in ways that surprised her. Drainage tunnels that ran beneath the wealthy districts, abandoned passages connecting cellars of buildings long since condemned, routes that no city map had ever documented. "How do you know all this?" Jessamine whispered, as they climbed through a gap in a crumbling foundation wall. "I've spent years learning how to disappear." His breathing was labored, each step clearly costing him. "It's a useful skill in my profession." By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, they'd reached the city's outer edge, a district of warehouses and workshops, where the smells of tanning leather and smoking fish hung thick in the air. Theron stopped before an unmarked door set into a brick wall stained black with soot. "Where are we?" Jessamine asked. "Somewhere safe." He knocked. 3 short raps, 2 long, 1 short. The door opened to reveal a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that assessed Jessamine with unsettling precision. "You're supposed to be dead," the woman said to Theron. "I'm told that often." "Mira, this is Jessamine Thorne, wanted for treason, 500 crowns. Mira's gaze didn't waver. "You've brought interesting company. She saved my life, and she has information we need." Mira studied Jessamine for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. "Brennick won't like this." "Brennick doesn't like anything. That's why we keep him." The interior of the building defied its exterior. Where Jessamine expected soot-stained walls and rotting floorboards, she found clean stone corridors lit by oil lamps, furnished rooms, and the distant murmur of voices. "What is this place?" she breathed. "A way station." Theron leaned heavily against the wall, his reserves clearly failing. "One of several throughout the city. Places where people like me can disappear when necessary." "People like you?" Jessamine looked at him. "Imperial agents." "Among others." They passed through an inner doorway, and Jessamine noticed a name carved into the stone above it. Ashford House. A chill ran through her. "The name I invented for you," she murmured. "In the alley, Theron Ashford." He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. Interesting coincidence. But the way he said it made her wonder if it was a coincidence at all. Mira led them through a series of corridors to a room containing 2 beds, a wash basin, and a small fireplace, where flames already crackled. "The physician will come within the hour," Mira said. "Food will be sent. Stay inside. Don't wander." Her eyes flicked to Jessamine. "Either of you." She left without another word. Theron collapsed onto the nearest bed with a groan that he clearly couldn't suppress. In the firelight, Jessamine could see how pale he'd become, the blood loss catching up with him. She moved to his side automatically, helping him remove his ragged outer tunic to examine the wound. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the flesh around the cut was angry, inflamed. "This needs proper treatment," she said. "It could fester." "The physician here is excellent, former military surgeon." His eyes were half closed. "You should rest too." "When did you last sleep?" Jessamine couldn't remember. The last 3 days had blurred into one continuous nightmare of running, hiding, surviving. "I'll rest when I know we're actually safe." "We're safe here." His voice was fading, exhaustion pulling him under. "I promise." She watched him slip into unconsciousness, this stranger who'd become her only ally. His face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger, more vulnerable. She noticed a thin scar along his jawline, another above his left eyebrow. A man who'd been hurt before. Who'd survived before. "Who are you, really?" she thought. "What have I found myself to?" But those questions would have to wait. Jessamine pulled a chair to the door, sat with her back against it, and kept watch through the long hours until dawn. She wouldn't sleep. Not yet. Not until she understood exactly what she'd walked into. The days that followed reshaped Jessamine in ways she hadn't anticipated. The way station, Ashford House, as she now knew it, was larger than it appeared. Beneath the warehouse facade lay a network of rooms housing nearly 24 people, agents, informants, analysts who pored over documents and whispered conversations in corners, an entire shadow organization operating beneath the Empire's notice, and at its center, recovering slowly from his wounds, was Theron. "Tell me about Corvin's study," he said on the third day, well enough now to sit upright and take notes. "The layout, the furniture. Where did he keep his private correspondence?" Jessamine closed her eyes, pulling memories from 12 years of living in that house. A mahogany desk beneath the eastern window. He liked the morning light. 3 locked drawers on the right side. I never saw keys for them until that night. A false panel behind the portrait of his father. "How did you find it?" "I knocked something against the wall while cleaning. The sound was wrong. Hollow." Theron wrote quickly. "What else?" And so it went. Hour after hour, day after day. Jessamine reconstructing every detail she could remember of Lord Corvin's household. The servants she'd trusted. The ones who'd seemed afraid. The visitors who came late at night and left before dawn. The conversations she'd overheard through walls she wasn't supposed to be near. She'd never realized how much she'd observed. How much she'd stored away without conscious thought. "You have a remarkable memory," Theron said one evening, reviewing his notes by candlelight. "I had to. When you're an orphan in someone else's house, you learn to watch everything, to notice when moods shift, when danger approaches." She stared at the fire. "It's how you survive." "Is that what you were doing? Surviving?" "I thought I was living." Her voice was quiet. "I thought he cared about me. 12 years, and I never saw what he truly was." "Predators are skilled at hiding. That's not your failure, it's his design." She looked at him. Really looked. For the first time in days, his color had returned. The wound was healing cleanly thanks to the surgeon's skill. But there were shadows beneath his eyes that she recognized. The weight of secrets carried too long. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you hiding from?" Theron was silent for a long moment. "My older brother died when I was 16, he said finally. Murdered by someone he trusted. Someone who smiled at our family dinners and plotted his death between courses." His jaw tightened. "He was everything I wanted to be. Brave, honorable, the heir our family deserved. And they took him from us. I'm sorry. I spent years learning everything I could about deception, about lies, about how to see through the masks people wear, because I swore I would never be fooled the way he was." "And were you? Fooled again?" "Once. It nearly cost me everything." He met her eyes. "That's why I don't trust easily, Jessamine. That's why I haven't told you everything about who I am. It's not that I think you'll betray me. It's that trust, for me, is a door that's very difficult to open. But you're asking me to trust you completely." "Yes. No hesitation. No excuse. And I know how unfair that is. I know I'm asking you to give what I struggle to offer in return." Jessamine considered his words, the honesty in them, the vulnerability he clearly hated showing. "Then let's make a different deal," she said slowly. "We trust each other in stages. You tell me things as we go. I prove myself as we go. Neither of us has to leap blind." Something eased in his expression. "That's reasonable." "I'm a reasonable person, when I'm not claiming strangers as my husband in dark alleys." He laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of him, and the sound transformed his face entirely. Made him look younger, lighter, almost handsome. Almost. "Very well," he said. "Stages it is. And speaking of stages..." He stood, gesturing for her to follow. "There's something I want to show you." He led her through corridors she hadn't explored to a room at the way station's heart. Inside, a massive table dominated the space, covered with documents, maps, and what appeared to be a web of names connected by colored threads. "This is everything we have on Corvin," Theron said. 15 months of investigation, and thanks to you, we've filled more gaps in 3 days than we did in the previous 6 months." Jessamine stared at the web of connections, at the scope of Corvin's treachery laid bare. This is how we'll destroy him, she breathed. No. Theron moved to stand beside her. This is how we'll expose him. Destruction requires something more. He turned to face her. I want you to testify. Not just provide information. Stand before the Imperial Court and tell them everything. Your face, your voice, your truth. Fear coiled in her stomach. They'll never believe me over him. They will. His voice was certain. Because you won't be standing alone. What do you mean? Theron held her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. I mean that when you face Lord Corvin, I'll be standing beside you. And when the court sees who I really am, they'll have no choice but to listen. The question burned on her tongue. Who are you? But before she could ask, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Mira appeared in the doorway, her face grim. We have a problem, she said. Corvin knows she's alive. He's doubled the reward and sent hunters beyond the city walls. Theron's expression hardened. How long do we have? Days. Maybe less. He looked at Jessamine, and she saw the calculation in his eyes shift to something fiercer, more protective. Then we move faster, he said, and we stop playing defense. The hunt had begun, and Jessamine realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that she was no longer the prey. She was about to become something far more dangerous. The test came sooner than expected. 2 days after Mira's warning, Theron called Jessamine to the strategy room. 3 others waited there. Agents she'd come to recognize, but not truly know. Brennick, a scarred man who never smiled. Lysara, a woman whose quiet demeanor concealed a mind like a steel trap. And Doval, barely older than Jessamine herself, with nervous hands and brilliant eyes. We've identified one of Corvin's informants, Theron said, gesturing to a sketch pinned to the wall. A thin-faced man with a distinctive crooked nose. He operates out of a tavern in the Copper District, the Broken Anchor. He passes messages between Corvin and his Kestrian contacts. You want to capture him? Jessamine said. We want to turn him. Capture creates noise. A turned informant gives us access to Corvin's communications without him knowing we're listening. Brennick grunted. Problem is, he knows all our faces. We get within 10 feet, he bolts. Theron's eyes found Jessamine. But he doesn't know yours. The room went still. You want me to approach him? She said slowly. I want you to convince him you're a servant girl fleeing Corvin's household, someone with information to sell. Theron's voice was steady, but she caught something beneath it. Reluctance, perhaps. You'd wear a disguise. We'd be close by. At the first sign of trouble, you'd intervene. Jessamine studied the sketch. The crooked nose, the thin lips. What's his name? Petrick Vance. He's greedy, paranoid, and utterly without loyalty to anyone but himself. So I appeal to his greed. You appeal to his self-preservation. Lysara spoke for the first time. Tell him Corvin's operation is compromised. Tell him you can prove it. Offer him a way out before the whole thing collapses. A nervous energy coiled in Jessamine's stomach. This was real. Not just providing information from the safety of hidden rooms, actually stepping into danger. And if he doesn't believe me, then you walk away, Theron said firmly. No heroics, no risks. You're not trained for confrontation, and I won't lose you to prove a point. I won't lose you. The words landed differently than he'd probably intended. When? She asked. Tonight. The Broken Anchor was everything Jessamine expected. Dim, smoky, filled with people who kept their eyes on their drinks and their business to themselves. She wore rough wool and a servant's cap, her face smudged with strategic dirt. Petrick Vance sat alone in a corner booth, nursing ale and suspicion in equal measure. Jessamine approached with her heart pounding against her ribs. I have information, she said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. About Lord Corvin. Information that could save your life, or end it. Vance's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Someone who knows the letters you carry aren't reaching their destination anymore. A lie, but delivered with conviction. Someone who knows Corvin is looking for a scapegoat, and someone who's offering you a choice. 20 minutes later, she walked out of the tavern with Petrick Vance's agreement to meet Theron's people, and a list of 3 other informants Corvin used throughout the city. When she reached the safe point where Theron waited, his expression shifted through surprise, relief, and something that looked almost like pride. "You did it," he said. "Was there any doubt?" "Yes." He took her hands. "And you proved me wrong." For the first time since her world collapsed, Jessamine felt something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. The weeks that followed moved with relentless momentum. Petrick Vance's information proved invaluable. Through him, they intercepted 3 separate communications between Corvin and his Kestrian handlers. They identified 2 more informants and quietly turned one. The web on the strategy room wall grew denser, the connections clearer. And somewhere in the midst of it all, something else began to grow. Jessamine noticed it in small moments. The way Theron's hand lingered when he passed her documents. The way his eyes found hers across crowded rooms. The way he began sharing things, not just information, but pieces of himself. His favorite book as a child. A collection of hero tales his mother had read to him before she died. The scar on his jaw. A training accident when he was 14, too eager to prove himself. His greatest fear. Not death, but failing the people who depended on him. "Why are you telling me these things?" she asked one night, when they sat alone in the strategy room long after the others had retired. Theron was quiet for a moment. The candlelight carved shadows across his face, softening the sharp angles, revealing the exhaustion he usually hid. "Because I'm tired of hiding," he said finally. "Because you're the first person in years who sees me as something other than a weapon or a title. Because—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Because I'm not pretending anymore, Jessamine. I don't know when it changed. But what I feel when I look at you, it's not strategy." Her breath caught. "Theron, you don't have to say anything. I know this complicates things. I know we're in the middle of something dangerous, and feelings are a liability we can't afford." He stood, moving toward the window, his back to her. "But I couldn't keep pretending I don't." "Don't what?" He turned, and the look in his eyes, raw, unguarded, terrified, stopped her heart. "Don't want you. Don't think about you constantly. Don't imagine what it would be like if this were real, if we were real." Jessamine rose slowly, crossed the room until she stood close enough to touch him. "Who says we're not?" She kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate. Months of tension and fear and longing colliding in a single moment. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, her fingers tangled in his hair. And for one perfect infinite breath, nothing existed but the 2 of them. Then the door crashed open. They sprang apart. Mira stood in the doorway, her face white. "Corvin's men," she said. "They've found the way station. They're coming. Now." The next minutes blurred into chaos. Shouted orders. Documents burning in hastily lit fires. Agents scattering through escape routes drilled 100 times but never used. Theron grabbed Jessamine's hand, pulling her through corridors she'd memorized weeks ago. Behind them, she heard the splintering of wood, the clash of steel, screams that cut off too quickly. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "The palace." His voice was grim. "It's time." "Time for what?" He stopped at a hidden door, turning to face her. His hands cupped her face, the same gesture from moments ago, but weighted now with urgency. "Time for the truth," he said. "All of it. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more warning. I'm sorry this is happening now. But Jessamine," his eyes burned into hers, "whatever happens next, whatever you see, whatever you learn, remember that what I feel for you is real. That was never a lie." "Theron, you're scaring me." "I know." He kissed her forehead, quick, fierce, desperate. "Stay close to me. Trust me one more time." He opened the door onto darkness, and Jessamine followed him into the unknown. The palace of Valdoria rose against the dawn sky like a mountain of white marble and gold. Jessamine had seen it before, of course. Every citizen of Caelmont had. But she'd never approached it. Never walked through the gates that separated the Empire's heart from its people. Never imagined she'd enter as anything but a spectator at some distant festival. Now she walked beside Theron through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past guards who stiffened to attention at the sight of him, past servants who bowed and scrambled from their path. Bowed. Theron, she whispered urgently. Why are they... Not yet. His hand found hers, squeezed. Trust me. They emerged into a vast chamber, the Hall of Ascension, she realized with a jolt of recognition. She'd seen paintings of this room, the vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of Valdoria's founding, the twin thrones on the raised dais at the far end, the galleries where nobles gathered to witness the Empire's most important moments. The galleries were full now. Hundreds of faces turned toward them as they entered, and at the center of the hall, standing before the empty thrones, was Lord Corvin Vantrell. He looked exactly as she remembered. Silver-streaked hair perfectly arranged, expensive robes cut to emphasize his authority, that pleasant smile that had fooled her for 12 years. When he saw her, the smile flickered. Jessamine. His voice carried across the hall, smooth as poisoned honey. My dear ward, we've been so worried about you. I doubt that. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Considering you tried to have me killed. Murmurs rippled through the galleries. Killed? Corvin's laugh was perfectly calibrated, concerned, confused, slightly pitying. My dear girl, you've clearly been through a terrible ordeal. The strain has affected your mind. Everyone here knows I've done nothing but search for you since your disappearance. Everyone here knows what you've told them. Theron's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Which is very different from the truth. Corvin's eyes moved to Theron. Something flickered in their depths. Recognition, calculation, the first stirring of fear. And who are you to speak of truth? Some vagabond she's attached herself to? Some opportunist hoping to profit from her delusions? I'm the one who intercepted your communications with Kestrian intelligence. Theron released Jessamine's hand and stepped forward. I'm the one who turned 3 of your informants. I'm the one who has documented proof of every secret you've sold, every payment you've received, every Imperial soldier who died because of information you provided to our enemies. The murmurs became a roar. Nobles rose from their seats. Guards shifted uncertainly. This is absurd. Corvin's composure cracked just slightly. You have no authority to make such accusations. You're nobody. Am I? Theron reached into his tunic and withdrew the ring, the heavy gold band bearing the twin phoenixes of House Valdric. The hall went silent. Do you recognize this seal, Lord Corvin? Theron's voice was ice. You should. You've spent 15 years trying to undermine everything it represents. That's not possible. Corvin stepped back, his face draining of color. The prince is dead. He died in the Kestrian campaign. Everyone knows what they were told. Theron's hand moved to his collar, unfastening the clasp that held his worn traveling cloak. It fell away, revealing what lay beneath, not the rough clothes of a vagabond, but a military tunic of pure white, embroidered with silver thread in patterns only the imperial family could wear. Prince Cadron Valdric died in Kestria, Theron said quietly. But I was never in Kestria. The death was a fiction, created so I could hunt traitors without interference, without warning, without mercy. He turned to face the galleries, and Jessamine saw it happen, the recognition spreading like fire through dry grass, the gasps, the hands raised to mouths, the sudden profound silence of 100 nobles realizing they stood in the presence of the Crown Prince of Valdoria. One by one they began to kneel, first the front rows, then the galleries, then the guards, the servants, everyone in the hall lowering themselves in deference to the man Jessamine had claimed as her husband in a dark alley to save his life. Everyone except Corvin. "This changes nothing," he snarled. "You have accusations, not proof. My word against some girl's fantasies, and a prince who's been playing pretend for years." "Then let's discuss proof." Theron, Cadrin, raised his hand. A door opened. Patrick Vance entered, followed by two other men Jessamine recognized from the strategy room wall. Corvin's informants, his network, his witnesses. "These men have provided detailed testimony of their work for you," Cadrin said. "We have letters, payments, dates, names, everything." "They're lying. They've been paid to—" "And we have this." Mira stepped forward, carrying a leather satchel. From it, she withdrew a stack of papers, letters bearing the seal of Kestria, in Corvin's own handwriting. "Recovered from your estate this morning," Cadrin said. "The false bottom in your desk drawer, the hidden panel behind your father's portrait. Jessamine told us exactly where to look." Corvin's eyes found Jessamine, and for the first time she saw him clearly. Not the guardian who'd raised her, not the pleasant mask he'd worn for years, but the desperate, cornered animal beneath. "You," he breathed. "You treacherous little—" "Careful." Cadrin's voice dropped to something dangerous. "That's my future empress you're addressing." The hall went absolutely still. Jessamine's heart stopped. "Future empress?" Cadrin turned to her, and in his eyes, those eyes the color of winter storms that had seen her from the beginning, she saw everything he hadn't been able to say. "I told you I'd give you everything," he said softly. "I meant it." Then he turned back to Corvin, and his voice became iron. "Lord Corvin Vantrell, by the authority vested in me as Crown Prince of Valdoria, I place you under arrest for high treason against the Empire. You will face trial, you will face justice, and you will face the truth you tried so hard to bury." Guards moved forward. Corvin struggled, shouted, threatened, but it was over. Everyone in the hall knew it. As they dragged him away, his eyes found Jessamine one last time. "You were nothing," he spat. "Nothing." Jessamine met his gaze without flinching. "I was everything," she said quietly. "You just never saw it." The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimony. 3 days of evidence presented before the imperial court. Letters, ledgers, the damning words of men who'd helped Corvin sell their empire piece by piece. 3 days of watching a man who'd once held her life in his hands crumble under the weight of his own treachery. Jessamine testified on the second day. She stood before hundreds of nobles, ministers, and dignitaries, the most powerful people in Valdoria, and told them everything. The night she'd found the letters. Corvin's cold response. Her flight through the city. The months of hiding, planning, preparing. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then a woman in the front row, an elderly duchess with sharp eyes and sharper diamonds, began to clap. Others joined. Within moments, the entire hall was applauding. For her. For the orphan girl who'd stood against a lord and won. Cadrin found her afterward, in a quiet antechamber where she'd retreated to catch her breath. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was terrified." That's what made it magnificent. He crossed to her, taking her hands. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. You've done that every single day since I met you. She looked at their joined hands. At the ring he now wore openly, the imperial seal that marked him as heir to everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. "Who you really were?" "At first, because I didn't know if I could trust you. Then because I didn't want to change how you saw me. And finally," he hesitated, "because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that once you knew, you'd see the crown instead of the man. That everything between us would become political calculation instead of—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Instead of what it became." "And what did it become?" His eyes met hers. Those eyes that had seen her at her lowest, her most desperate. her most vulnerable, and had never once looked away. "Everything," he said simply. "You became everything." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of all that remained unspoken hanging between them. Then the door opened. Mira appeared, her expression carefully neutral. "The verdict is in." They returned to the hall together. The galleries were packed even tighter than before, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. The entire empire seemed to be holding its breath. Lord Corvin stood in chains before the twin thrones. For the first time since his arrest, Emperor Valdric himself was present, an aging man with Cadron's gray eyes and an air of terrible, quiet authority. "Lord Corvin Vantrell, we..." The Emperor's voice filled the hall without effort. "You have been found guilty of high treason, conspiracy with foreign powers, and attempted murder. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Your own confederates have testified to your crimes. You have brought shame upon your house, your name, and the empire you swore to serve." Corvin said nothing. His face was a mask of hatred. "The penalty for treason is death. However..." The Emperor's gaze moved to Jessamine, standing beside Cadron at the base of the dais. "It has been requested that mercy be considered, not for your sake, but for the sake of justice over vengeance." Jessamine felt the weight of 1,000 stares. She'd made that request. She didn't want Corvin's death. She wanted his ruin. His public, permanent, inescapable ruin. "Your sentence is commuted to life imprisonment in the Saltstone Fortress. Your titles are stripped. Your lands are forfeit. Your name will be erased from the rolls of nobility." The Emperor stood. "You will live, Lord Corvin. You will live with what you've done. And you will never, ever be forgotten. Or forgiven." Guards moved forward. As they led Corvin past Jessamine, he stopped. "You think you've won," he said softly, "but you'll never truly belong here. You'll always be the orphan girl playing dress-up. The moment they see weakness, they'll devour you." Jessamine stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her response. "You tried to break me," she whispered. "You threw me away like garbage, and I came back as the woman who destroyed you." She smiled, a small, cold, triumphant thing. "I don't need to belong here. I just need to be standing when you fall." They dragged him away. And then, in the silence that followed, Emperor Valdric descended from his throne. He stopped before Jessamine. This man who ruled an empire. This man whose son had asked her to be his empress. "Miss Thorne," he said, and his voice carried through the hall. "My son has told me what you did. How you saved his life without knowing who he was. How you stood against corruption when everyone else looked away. How you risked everything for truth and justice." He extended his hand. "The Empire owes you a debt it can never fully repay, but we can start with this." He gestured, and a servant approached carrying a velvet cushion. On it rested a circlet of silver and sapphires, delicate, beautiful, and unmistakably royal. "The crown of the chosen," the Emperor said, "worn by every woman who has stood beside a prince of Valdoria. Worn now by you." He lifted the circlet and placed it gently on Jessamine's head. Then Emperor Valdric, ruler of the greatest empire in the known world, bowed to her. And one by one, every person in the hall followed. Lords and ladies, ministers and generals, servants and guards. They knelt before the orphan girl who'd saved a prince, exposed a traitor, and changed the course of history. Jessamine stood in the center of it all, the weight of the crown on her brow, tears streaming down her face. She'd been left with nothing, condemned, hunted, forgotten. And now an empire bowed at her feet. That night, Cadron found her in the palace gardens. The celebration had been overwhelming. Endless introductions, congratulations, questions she didn't know how to answer. She'd escaped as soon as protocol allowed, seeking silence among the moonlit roses and marble fountains. He approached without announcement, settling onto the bench beside her. "Hiding from your new admirers?" "Hiding from everyone." She looked at him. Except you. The moonlight painted him in silver and shadow. Crown Prince. Future Emperor. The most powerful man in Valdoria after his father. And the man who'd held her hand in a dark alley and asked her to trust him. I have something to say, he began, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. She nodded. When I first proposed our arrangement, it was strategy. A wounded agent and a convenient witness, combining resources to achieve a common goal. I told myself that's all it was. He paused. I was lying. To you. To myself. Kadrin. Let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped into that alley. This terrified, desperate woman who saw a stranger about to die and chose to save him anyway. Who claimed a beggar as her husband without knowing his name. Who had every reason to run and instead stood her ground. He turned to face her fully. I've spent years surrounded by people who want something from me. My title, my influence, my crown. You're the first person who saw me, just me, and chose to stay anyway. You're the first person I've trusted in longer than I can remember. I didn't know who you were. Exactly. You didn't know. And you saved me anyway. You trusted me anyway. You. His voice caught. You kissed me anyway, before you knew about the crown or the palace or any of it. You wanted me. Jessamine felt tears prick her eyes. I still do, she whispered. The crown terrifies me. The palace overwhelms me. The thought of being empress makes me want to run and never stop. She reached for his hand. But you, I want. The man who found me in the darkness. The man who never once made me feel worthless. The man who looked at a nobody orphan and saw someone worth fighting for. You were never nobody. I know that now, because you showed me. He cupped her face in his hands, the same gesture from the way station, from the strategy room, from every moment when words weren't enough. I love you, he said. Not because you saved me or helped me or brought down my enemies. I love you because you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving you deserve every good thing this world can offer. I love you too. The words came easily now, unlocked by everything they'd survived together. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to, but I do. Completely. He kissed her then, soft and slow, with all the time in the world, and Jessamine finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not for strategy, not for convenience, just for herself. 1 year later, Empress Jessamine Valdrick stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the sun rise over Kelmont. The city had changed since Corvin's fall. His network had been dismantled piece by piece. The families he'd betrayed had received restitution from his seized assets. The soldiers who'd died because of his treachery had been honored with monuments throughout the empire. And Jessamine herself had changed most of all. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd run through these streets with nothing but terror and determination. She was a wife, a leader, and, as of 3 months ago, a mother. Her daughter, Alara, slept peacefully in the nursery, guarded by people Jessamine trusted with her life. Footsteps behind her, familiar, beloved. You're up early. Kadrin wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts. Good thoughts or bad? Good ones. She leaned into his warmth. I was thinking about that night in the alley. What would have happened if I'd stayed hidden? If I'd let them kill you? Then you'd have saved yourself, made a logical choice, and lost everything that matters. He turned her to face him. A year of marriage, and he still looked at her like she was the most remarkable thing he'd ever seen. You saved a stranger because it was right, he said. That's who you are. That's who you'll always be. And that's why this empire is lucky to have you. Behind them, the palace was waking. Servants beginning their routines, ministers preparing for the day's audiences, 1,000 moving pieces in the machinery of empire. And at its heart, Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something extraordinary from the ruins of what they'd lost. Jessamine reached up, touching the circlet she now wore daily, the crown of the chosen, symbol of everything she'd earned. "I pretended to love a beggar to save his life," she said softly. "I never imagined that you'd actually fall in love with him? That he'd give me the whole world in return." Kadrin smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that belonged only to her. "You gave me far more," he said. "You gave me hope. You gave me truth. You gave me a reason to believe in people again." He kissed her forehead. "You gave me everything, Jessamine. I'm just spending my life trying to return the favor." She smiled against his chest, holding him close as the sun painted the sky in gold and rose. She'd been abandoned, condemned, left with nothing. And now she had everything that mattered. Because sometimes, the choice to save a stranger becomes the choice that saves yourself. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this journey touched something in you, the courage to stand when everything says run, the power of being truly seen, the choice to fight for what's right even when it costs everything, we hope you'll share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're listening from. And if you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even in the darkest moments, one choice can change everything.